call the Saline City Council meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a few changes to the agenda. We have Dustin Krasny is here. He's our Congressman Wahlberg's field representative, and he's going to be speaking after Mary Jo. And we also have a handout we got on the counter tonight from, it says it's to Justine. It goes under discussion.
No, this was a note from Mary. She's going to talk about it.
Oh, I see, okay. And then we also have a opinion from Attorney Grossman for under discussion. And we have a change to the item, thank you, 11-100 for employee contracts through June 30th, 2012. A little typo there. Is there any other changes to the agenda? Do we have a motion to?
City manager not here? I'm sorry, Mayor. What was the correction you made to item 11-100?
So on the last motion, it would be to change the employment contracts from July 1, 2011 through July 30, 2012.
All right.
It's on the last page.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. With that, I'd move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Umar, second Gearba. We need a motion to, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we need a motion to excuse the absence of Councilmember Ivy, please.
So moved.
Second.
Umar, second Gearba. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We now have a presentation from Mary Jo Callan about the Urban County program that we're looking at joining.
Good evening.
Hold down a little bit more.
A little more.
That's good. Thanks.
Okay. So for folks who are interested, I'm happy to get this to anyone who wants me to send this presentation. I think you all have hopefully a copy of it in your packet. Essentially, I wanted to talk with you about the Urban County, the Washtenaw Urban County, which is a collaboration of local jurisdictions. Currently, there are 11 local communities that are in the Urban County, and 5 more, have expressed their intent to join the Urban County. So let me explain what it is. The Urban County essentially, again, is a collaboration of local jurisdictions who come together to draw down federal funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, specifically Community Development Block Grant funds and home funds. These funds are all focused on serving lower income folks in communities. And Community Development Block Grant is used for, I'm giving you the abbreviated version, but obviously I'm happy to answer questions. So Community Development Block Grant funds are really aimed at revitalizing neighborhoods and specific parts of communities, doing some single-family and multifamily development and housing rehabilitation. Home dollars are expressly used really for homes, for housing development, single-family rehabilitation, those sorts of services. So the Washtenaw Urban County began in 2003 with a group of 5 local communities. And what the purpose of an urban county is essentially to be a big enough sort of community by joining together so that the federal government recognizes us and sends money directly to us instead of sending it essentially to the state, who then has a competitive process for these funds that communities can apply for and manage. The local jurisdictions, again, came together in 2003. Since then, since the initial 5, we've had 6 more communities join. They are, excuse me, the urban county jurisdictions are Ann Arbor Township, Bridgewater Township, Northfield, Pittsfield, Salem, Superior, Ypsilanti, Scioto, and York Townships, City of Ypsilanti, City of Ann Arbor, Dexter Township, actually in Dexter, Lima, Manchester Township, the Village of Manchester, and Webster. Those last 5 have all passed board resolutions and expressed their intent to join starting in 2012, which is when the next essentially sort of participating period begins. Just briefly, the way the urban county works, we get an annual allocation. Each community essentially gets a share of that total pool. And so the city of Saline, like every other jurisdiction, essentially gets back what it brings in based on its population, poverty rate, and some of the condition of its housing stock. The amount that each jurisdiction and then the total pool is determined by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so, for example, if the city of Saline were to join, starting in July of 2012, that's when this urban county fiscal year starts, July 1, the city of Saline would bring in essentially about $26,000 in community development block grant funds each year and about $20,000 in home funds each year that would be drawn down, put into the full pool, but that would be owed to the city of Saline. So essentially the bylaws of the urban county call for each jurisdiction getting what it, in each 3-year cooperative period, so if you were to join, you'd be joining for a 3-year period, and then at the end of that 3 years, every community decides if it wants to continue or not. But for that 3-year period, Saline would be guaranteed to get that, $26,000, so essentially, let's say $50,000 each year. So you'd be guaranteed to get about $150,000 out of this urban county, and that comes in a few different forms. So let me tell you a little bit about how that works. The urban county funding, community development block grant, and home funds for participants are used in a few different ways. Every community uses it for specific citizens who are homeowners. So every member who has been a part of the urban county has had citizens who need housing repairs, maybe who have code violations, safety issues, health issues that they can't afford to address on their own. And so the urban county funding, administered by the Office of Community Development, and I can tell you more about that in a minute, essentially works with homeowners, makes sure they're eligible. They have to be lower income, and lower income is defined by 80% of the area median income or below. And so we do an eligibility assessment. We go out, we do an inspection of the home to help the homeowner identify the most pressing needs, and bid that work out for them, and essentially do project management for them, working with private contractors in the community to actually do the construction. Every community that's a part of the urban county has used their funding in part for what's called single-family rehabilitation. We also do, energy improvement work for some, if there's other issues that bring us into the home. And then we do a lot, and I think I shared this with some of you prior, we do a lot more and more of helping folks age in place. So a lot of, accessibility improvements and that sort of thing. So that's one activity that is sort of universally utilized by communities. Some communities use their urban county funds for public infrastructure improvements. The city of Ypsilanti used it for some curb cuts to make their sidewalk system more accessible for folks who are handicapped. Some have used it for senior centers improvements, accessibility improvements. Some have used it actually for their township hall, again, accessibility improvements. We've done, excuse me, this is going to continue, sorry.
Do you want some water?
That would be great, thanks.
Gretchen,
Pardon me. So we have done other kinds of what are sort of thought of as public improvement. We've done sewer improvements for discrete neighborhoods who have had flooding issues, and then some other street improvements and things like that. But by and large, thank you so much. Pardon me. But by and large, every community has enough funds to do some single-family rehab projects. Some have enough to do some public infrastructure projects. 15% of the community development block grant pool is set aside for human services. And so each year the urban county funds a portion of some of the human services in the community. So essentially, those are the kind of projects. I think in your packet is some examples. We've done, we fund Habitat for Humanity to do new construction and now rehabilitation. But there's a lot of different examples of projects we've done in various communities. I mentioned the amount. It's about $26,000 in block grant each year, $20,000 about in home dollars. The question that we always get asked is, well, what does it cost to join, or what are the detriments to a community should they decide to join the urban county? So there's a couple, I think, issues that people typically look at in terms of weighing the pros and cons. The benefits, obviously, are you get annual planned for funding. So every year you're going to get this much. You can plan for what you want to do with those funds in any year period or 3-year period. You get funds that are heavily regulated and somewhat onerous to manage, and you get those and have us manage it for you. So essentially, you do the thinking and the planning. We work with you on the planning, but really you do what does your community need, and we help you implement it and handle sort of the regulatory side of things. The other benefit, and we've gotten a lot of feedback to this regard from current members, is that you sit at the table with your peer communities, all of whom have some similar challenges, you're a part of really a regional body that looks at a region and its needs, but you get to address your needs within that individually. Those are the primary benefits. The potential cost, one, there's no cost to join. There's no actual dollars that you're putting out. You're getting money to join. But as we have discussed prior, when a community joins an urban county, there are certain state funds, specifically these community development block grant funds and home funds, that you can no longer apply for as a local government. For an example, if you have a commercial or a mixed-use development that will have maybe a mixed income component or will create jobs in an area that might be economically challenged, you can't apply to MSHDA, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, or the Michigan Economic Development Corporation directly as the City of Saline to bring funds down. You can use your urban county funds. You could have the developer apply for those funds and pull those down. And you can apply for a whole host of other funds available from the state. But for these specific community development block grant funds and home funds, the city could not apply directly. As I've shared with some of you, any major development that we have seen in the last several years has been a mix, essentially a package of financing that has come from a lot of different sources, public and private, federal, state, and local. So, but it is absolutely something that the city would have to weigh in terms of, foregoing direct application for those funds. I think those are the big pieces. I'm happy to provide more information or answer specific questions that folks may have.
Does any council members have any questions? Mr. Law.
Question concerning the contractors that would be selected. Are they selected by the homeowners? Should they get the funding, or is it by the government entity that is charged with distributing these funds?
That's a great question. So it's sort of, it's a little of both. The homeowner decides who they want to work with. These are federal funds, and so we do have to go with the lowest, what is called responsible bidder. And so what we do as the Office of Community Development is we put out essentially a call for contractors every year. Contractors respond to that, and then we make sure they have, they're reputable, they're bonded, sort of all the things that we want to make sure that we're not sending folks into people's homes or giving referrals to folks who aren't sort of reputable contractors. They go through essentially a certification process, which consists of, again, making sure they are actually licensed and bonded, but also checking references, checking with former jobs they've done and things like that, making sure they understand what it means to be sort of working with this project and that sort of thing. So then we have this pool of contractors. When, if we were to come out to your home and you needed repairs, we essentially would put together this inspection report. We'd prioritize the work. We'd put out a bid, and any contractor who's in our pool of contractors, we currently have about 45 contractors in that pool, can decide to do a walkthrough and submit a bid for that job. Then we work with the homeowner to make sure that what the contractor has bid on is what they think they're getting and need and that sort of thing. So it's a mix of the two things. The contract is between the contractor and the homeowner. We're not we don't essentially get involved in that only in so much as sometimes conflict resolution or sort of that sort of thing. But it really is the homeowner. It is their house, it is their work, and they're working with the contractor.
So it sounds like then the contract or the homeowner can only draw from the 45 in that pool, the ones that you have there.
That is true. That's true. But any contractor in the community is welcome to get certified through us.
One more question concerning the amount that Saline would get. If they were not to use that amount, then would that be gone, and then, or would we be having to re-up for another 3 years to draw from that same pool, or do we go back to square one to the 26, whatever it is that we are starting out with?
So how it works is for each 3-year period. So let's say you were to join, and in 2000, the sort of July through June, the 2012-13 year, Saline didn't have a project, didn't use any of its money. That money would essentially, number one, that money would be used during that year probably by a different jurisdiction, but not without your permission. So if Saline didn't have a project, we wouldn't just let that money sit there, because next year we're going to get another allocation. But what would happen is that next year, Saline could use $50,000, or you could use your full $75,000 in one of the 3 years. I can tell you that there have been a couple of situations where communities in a 3-year period haven't used their full project allocation. They've all used the housing rehabilitation pool, and that has, in every case except for one, sort of made sure it sort of put that community up to their threshold that they get back. York Township, there was one 3-year participating period where they didn't spend all of their money because they didn't have a homeowner rehab project, and they didn't have any other kind of project. And so they, Joe Zarowski, I think I shared this with you, described them as a donor community, and they allowed another community to use their funds. But the funds are set, they are sort of earmarked for your community to use during that 3-year period.
Any further? Oh, Mr. Hart.
Yes, could you
You've said that the county group is responsible for administering the technicalities of all of this. What, if any, involvement is there on the part of the city and city staff in the process of, for example, bringing projects forward or screening them
That's a good
for
question.
eligibility?
Yeah, so a couple things. I didn't talk about governance. I apologize for that. So for starters, every community who's a participant in the urban county has a seat at what is called the Urban County Executive Committee. It's the governing board for these funds that come down. The pool right now is about $3.5 million that comes into the community. So each of the current, what has been 11 communities and what hopefully will be 17 communities, send, by the bylaws state the highest elected official, or in this case, her designee. Some communities have city council people or a different trustee. Some send their supervisor or mayor. And then some have staff that come, whether it's the manager or planning staff or whatever, who come as their designee. Many communities send their representatives, or their official representative, but also bring their planning staff, because there is a lot that happens that I think is of interest to folks who are doing planning. So that's one way that council has a representation. In that governance, that jurisdiction's representative can veto any project in your own community. So no one can say, like, Saline, here's what you're going to do with your money next year. So that's not how it works. In terms of city staff, here's how it tends to work in terms of involvement. Let's say it's the mayor who is the representative. We say to all the jurisdictions, okay, guys, it's time for our annual planning process. We need ideas for your projects. What are your priorities? Well, first, what are your projects? Just send us your ideas for projects. The housing rehab project, that's not anything you need to plan, because anytime you send a homeowner to us or someone finds us, if they're eligible, we do the job. So that's not something you need to tell us you want to do. But let's say it's a sidewalk improvement or a bus shelter or whatever it is. You essentially send us, I imagine that the mayor would work with staff to get sort of as exhaustive of a list as possible of your possible projects. You send that to us. We do an initial vetting, so we check, is the project on its face an eligible activity? You know, is it finger painting? We can't fund that, so we're going to take that off the list. Then we look, is it in a geographic location that is automatically eligible because it's a low or moderate income area? And Saline only has a little bit, there's a little section in Saline that it would automatically qualify. So then we would do that initial vetting. Then we would contact the mayor or whomever your designee is, and if the mayor says, you know, contact Lee on this, we would contact Lee and say, okay, of the 6 projects you sent to us, these 2 or these 3 seem to be eligible, or like we could see if we could make them eligible. And so that is generally kind of how the process works. So we do a lot of work with all the city and local jurisdictional staff, as well as their elected officials. So is that answering your question? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Probably more than you wanted, but.
No, that's good.
We had a work session, so I know a lot of questions were asked before. Any other questions? Mary Jo? Okay, great. We'll appreciate your coming and presenting. Thank you. Next, we have Dustin Krasny, who's, are you a resident right now, or are you?
No longer.
Are you going to come back later?
I'm working on it.
Okay, good. He's our Congressman Wahlberg field rep, and he wanted to say a few words about what's going on.
Thank you so much, Mayor and City Council, for allowing me to jump into the schedule. I have to go down the street shortly after this and have a meeting with some of our proudest and finest citizens we have, our veterans, men and women who served overseas throughout the years and have helped protect this city and made it one of the best places in the country to live in and grow up in. I'm a local representative for Congressman Wahlberg, and I just want to give you a brief update on what's going on in the 112th Congress. The Congressman is committed to working on issues of concern to our public and why they send him to Washington. He's committed to creating jobs here in Michigan and throughout the nation. He's also committed on cutting spending. Voted for a cut in the 10-year budget of $6 trillion, which will hope to get our nation back on track. He's also committed to staying in touch with his constituents. He's held several dozen town halls throughout this district and in the area. A month or two ago, he was across the street and had a coffee hour. Most commonly, citizens' concerns are issues relating to high gas prices and job creation throughout this area. Congressman's introduced legislation to drill in Anwar, a remote area of Alaska rich with billions of barrels of oil. Feels if our local communities and citizens feel it's necessary to drill in their backyards, like here in Washtenaw County, then it's surely okay to drill in Alaska to bring down our ever-increasing dependence on foreign oil. The Congressman's voting consistently to cut spending. He voted for $6 trillion of cuts, which I mentioned, the so-called Paul Ryan House Republican budget, which has some tough fiscal cuts in it. But to put this in perspective, it doesn't balance the budget for another 26 years. So he's looking at that, and hopefully that budget will be passed as well. 2 weeks ago, the House voted on a debt ceiling raise unanimously. Republicans and not unanimously, but Democrats and Republicans alike voted to shoot down the debt ceiling increase because they all feel that with $14.4 trillion worth of national debt, about $80,000 per American taxpayer, that it's time that Congress stops worrying about the next election and starts focusing on the next generation. So he's going to hold a tough line on that as well. But with that update, I'd be happy to answer any questions that City Council members would have for me.
Is there any questions? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Under our next item on the agenda is citizen comments on agenda items under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time and may comment or question on items that appear on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. Anyone who'd like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, and I have distributed some papers for information to be received from Mary Hess. About April 19th, 3 sidewalk cafes were authorized by the council, and 2 of them were to have 5-foot sidewalk, and the Brecken Grill was allowed to have a 36-inch pathway, and that's the way it's reported. I voiced my concern at that time and since, and then I contacted the state, MDOT, and MDOT said that they would check into it. There was a letter sent to the city, or to the state, by Mr. Rubel, and it says regarding Building Inspector Tillman Taylor visited the Brecken Grill this afternoon. They do have a 5 feet of width for pedestrian travel. Now, it says 36-inch pathway, so I'm not sure about that. I got that under FOIA, paid for it. Then, of course, this spring, Dan's Cafe asked for a sidewalk cafe, and that would have been May 19th, 2010, it was last year. And part of the criteria was from Gary Rubel, and it says sidewalk cafes. And it goes on that the Dan's Cafe would have 5.6 inches to 6 feet for their main walkway. And Part B, it says special use permit, section 6-09, provides 7 factors that form the basis of determination for a sidewalk cafe service. And I will go down to number 3, time permitting. It says, number 3, if a sidewalk cafe is located on a public sidewalk, a minimum of 5 feet of unobstructed pedestrian access along the sidewalk shall be maintained. I make a point on shall and unobstructed. I have brought up pictures over the years. Over the last year, I have brought up a measure as far as I'm about 19 inches across my shoulders, and if you, as I said, Mr. Campbell would have been, his shoulders would have been at least 20 inches. So that's a 39 inch just in shoulders, not counting our hands, not counting other areas that might get wider on a 36-inch. I think that in many instances, on 2 instances, it says there shall be 5 feet. I think it's biased to have any less than that, and also not against the ADA laws. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas Frederick, Lodi Township, Mayor Driscoll and council members. I'm just coming to speak on the proclamation of June being LGBT Pride Month. And in light of trying to avoid being divisive in any way, I'd like to just read, with your permission, an excerpt from a letter that was sent to the mayor regarding this proclamation. Dear Mayor Driscoll, I recently read in an article in the Arbor News that our City Council has adopted a proclamation declaring June as LGBT Pride Month. I would like to contest this proclamation as a citizen of Saline. I wish to instead propose a declaration for June as a month to celebrate the diversity of our residents with an emphasis on fighting prejudice and discrimination among all peoples. Since this seems to be your goal in this declaration, it is only fitting that the month be inclusive of all of our citizens. I do believe that it's important to celebrate and discuss our many differences. Let me explain my opposition to this proclamation. I believe that, 1, we are all created equal and deserve the same rights. 2, we would certainly celebrate the strengthening and enriching contributions of individuals regardless of sexual preference. 3, all individuals should have equal and fair opportunities to live productive lives. And 4, all should be able to live their lives free from discrimination, fear, and violence. My opposition lies within the celebration of specific individuals based upon their gender identity and sexual orientation. These individuals have made many undeniable contributions to our society, but those accomplishments have nothing to do with their sexual preferences. Why point that out as the reasoning behind our recognition for them? It seems absurd to do so. This month can be used to celebrate all individuals that have worked to fight against hate, prejudice, and discrimination. I'm not a politician, a lawyer, or a scholar seeking to gain anything in writing you this letter. I'm only a citizen that seeks to have my voice heard. Please consider my proposal. And that was back in May. All I would like to say to the council is, one, I do laud you trying to honor and make welcome all citizens of Saline. But by choosing this specific issue, one which is divisive and divides members of our community, and then choosing a side on it, by celebrating it, you have chosen to exclude other members. So I would ask that in future proclamations, you could try to be more all-inclusive of all community members and viewpoints. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, is this an agenda item?
Well, I think there's a fine line because it's in our minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay.
So I'm going to, normally, this would not, this is, Mr. Frederick, I appreciate your comments. Normally, it's items on the agenda, which we don't specifically have that item on our agenda tonight. However, because we are approving minutes from the last meeting, I didn't interrupt you, but really, what we're trying to do is the business of the evening, which is the items that are specifically on the agenda first. That's why people are here for items that are on the agenda. And then we take all comments at the end of the meeting so that for all the people that are here for the items on the agenda, it doesn't interrupt our business meeting, if you understand. So if there are other people that want to speak to that issue, I would request that you wait till the end of the meeting because it's really not an agenda item under discussion, and we won't be discussing. We would be happy to hear your comments, okay? So.
Okay, since I'm already standing up here, Mayor Driscoll, and I will be brief, even though I know you've said that it needs to be addressing the agenda items. My name is Jacob Kujira. I live at 708 Bassett Drive in Saline, 5 blocks north of here. And last week, 5 people came up here in support of this LGBT month, and 1 person against it. And that happened before the meeting. And so that's why I'm up here, and I thought that was the appropriate time. So excuse me for
That's
doing
fine.
that.
I just,
Okay. You've received my letter, Mayor Driscoll, council members. Mayor Driscoll and I have been in contact with each other concerning this month, and 2 points that I made out in this letter were, 1, to rescind such proclamation that was made on May 16th, and 2, to instead declare the month as a month to celebrate the diversity of all individuals within our community. And if I can have any further direction in the process to rescind such a declaration, I will contact council members further, and I would appreciate a reply, and I will look for that. And please look for my emails, okay? Okay, thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Kelly Saya-Cork from Saline Township. I do business here in the city with our local folks because I love being here. And several things have caught my attention that are in the agenda for tonight through the news. One is the electrical vehicle charging station that would be a grant. I'm not sure how accurate the newspaper was in its article, but what I gathered from it was the city would like to turn it down because it's free money and we don't want to accept gifts, and it's too difficult to figure out how to charge people for the electricity they use, and that one person abstained from voting because they own an electric car or hybrid. Didn't really make much sense to me. I know everyone in this city, there are so many educated people who could help you with the math to figure out how much you should charge for, coming up and filling your electrical battery. And as far as abstaining because you own a car that might utilize it, I do wonder if all the homeowners on the council would abstain from any property tax votes. So that might be something you just want to consider that, and like I said, I don't know how accurate the newspaper report was, but that was in the newspaper recently. The other thing that I am concerned about is the upcoming discussion of getting rid of the police dispatchers. I have myself coming home from functions with veterans where I had not been drinking, where I've had to call 911 to get assistance because there were drunk drivers in front of me, or possibly they weren't drunk. Perhaps they were having a diabetic episode or whatnot, but I was able to actually, at off hours, come in to the police department here, and I knew after my phone call that it definitely was taken care of, and I really did feel my city was safer, and I was safer for coming, for taking my children out. So I feel that Pittsfield Township is a huge area, lots of businesses, lots of industry, tons and tons of condominiums, high population. It's not just the little part that comes to our schools. I think we're doing a disservice, one, to them, and also here. As a resident of Saline Township, I know what it's like to not have emergency services. This isn't something I suggest that the city does. The counties are overburdened. The state police are overburdened. They're looking to cut those fundings deeper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to ask permission. We do have a few more people who would like to speak on the gay pride proclamation made. And to be fair, since you did allow 2 weeks ago people to speak on that issue, which wasn't on the agenda, will you allow us to speak this
It
meeting?
actually was on the agenda under, there was a report out by one of the council members, so we did have it on the agenda.
Okay.
That's the pleasure of council.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, you continue.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. While I support acknowledging contributions made by our Saline citizens, I disagree with your decision to celebrate the contributions to our community based on a sexual lifestyle choice, namely the LBGT Pride Month. I presume that since this proclamation was made without any mention of the LBGT lifestyle chosen by the LBGT community, you will want to proclaim this. You also want to proclaim the lifestyle choices of gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgenders. promoting and celebrating this lifestyle is not in the best interest of the community, nor of the individual. And I would like to make some points of some facts here that I will list here, especially to those, and I think we all should be aware of these points, especially those teens and adults who are questioning their sexuality. First of all, no one is born gay. This conclusion is based on many studies of identical twins published in peer-reviewed literature from the 1990s and shows that social experiences and less gendered socialization in early childhood shapes subsequent same-sex romantic preferences. Homosexuals experience considerably higher levels of mental illness and substance abuse than heterosexuals. A detailed review of the research has shown that no other group of comparable size in society experiences such intense and widespread pathology. And this conclusion was made from a 2009 article in the peer-reviewed Journal of Human Sexuality. Even a study in the Netherlands, perhaps the most gay-friendly country in the world, showed a high prevalence of substance use disorders in homosexual women and a higher prevalence of mood and anxiety disorders in homosexual men. And thirdly, both because of the high-risk behavior patterns such as sexual promiscuity and because of the harm to the body from specific sexual acts, homosexuals are at greater risk than heterosexuals for sexually transmitted diseases and other forms of illness and injury. The most obvious and dramatic example of the negative consequences of homosexual conduct among men is the AIDS epidemic. And in 2009, well, I won't say that. Why don't I finish up by saying that these facts came from a 2010 summary by the Family Research Council, which has stated the top 10 myths about homosexuality. And I bring these facts up so that those questioning teens and adults can make well-informed decisions about their sexuality. In the future, when you speak of the LGBT community, please make the distinction between the LGBT individual and the LGBT lifestyle. I would recommend that we should not praise the LGBT lifestyle, but praise all individuals with no mention of sexual preferences. Thank you.
I appreciate you letting us do the comments ahead of time because I don't think my son would make it till 9:30. Plus, a lot of us just found out about this proclamation. We didn't even realize it. We didn't realize it was on an agenda, and so this is the first chance we're having to speak about it. My name is Kathy Dobrowolski, and I reside at 218 West Bemis Road in Saline. I am here tonight to ask you to reconsider your proclamation for June as LGBT Pride Month. Instead, I'm proposing a proclamation for the month of June to end discrimination against all residents of Saline and to celebrate all of our citizens who make contributions to our community. I realize members of the LGBT community have at times been discriminated against. However, they are not the only group to have experienced prejudice. I have a son with severe mental and physical disabilities, as well as a son who had severe depression and mental illness. Both have been discriminated against, as well as bullied, harassed, and rejected because of their issues. Both were members of this Saline community. The mentally ill and the disabled have encountered much adversity in our society, yet have also made significant contributions to our communities and the world. I would like to propose Saline dedicate future months to the mentally disabled and the physically disabled. Also, why are we celebrating contributions to our community based on an individual's sexual preference? Since when does sexual preference determine what type of contributions they will make to society? Why not just acknowledge a person for the contribution they make and leave it at that? Unless the goal is to promote acceptance of a certain type of lifestyle, namely the LGBT lifestyle, which is why this proclamation seems to be a more politicized promotion of a certain type of lifestyle rather than an actual celebration of a person's contributions to the community. If you say this proclamation has nothing to do with promoting the LGBT lifestyle, then which month will you be proclaiming as Heterosexual Pride Month? In the interest of fairness, you need to be tolerant of all people's beliefs in our community, including those who disagree with the LGBT lifestyle. And to clarify, the disagreement is with their lifestyle, not with who they are as human beings. As human beings, they deserve the same respect and decent treatment that all people deserve. But trying to win that respect through a proclamation, which excludes and divides others, I don't feel is the way to go about it. I ask that in the future, the City of Saline would proclaim the month of June to be in recognition of all its citizens who have contributed to the community and to respect the dignity of all its members, irregardless of race, creed, disability, gender, sexual preference, or whatever. Otherwise, in all fairness, you will have to issue monthly proclamations for all groups who experience adversity, prejudice, violence, discrimination, and who also contribute to society. Unfortunately, there aren't enough months in the year to handle the number of groups and causes that should be recognized this way. Therefore, recognizing one group at the exclusion of the others is not a way to unify our community or to promote tolerance and acceptance for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ray Lipa. I'm from Lodi Township. As someone who has seen professional colleagues and a family relative die from their LGBT behaviors, I am against an LGBT Pride Month. I realize that some people who have been in this room before me wanted the Saline schools to advance the LGBT agenda last summer. This summer, you are using your power to promote the LGBT agenda on the good city of Saline. That is sad. LGBT behaviors shorten people's lives and caused increased rates of sexual diseases, suicides, and mental illnesses. Saline's leaders should not be promoting any events and behaviors that could increase the risks to our brothers and sisters. Events like the LGBT Pride Month could hurt them and increase liabilities to the city in the future.
Good evening. I'm Larry Osterling with the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce, and I will keep these comments extremely brief. However, it does pertain to an item on the agenda tonight that's 11-99. I notice we have a stipulation for settlement with Thomas Poirier. On behalf of Dr. Poirier, and I don't see him here this evening, I'd just like to say he is someone we don't know to be of an impeccable reputation, one of the talented type people that Saline manages to attract, and someone we know to have a good way around town. I'd also like to compliment Assessor Skull, not only for this, but for her ongoing work. She's just really good at working out fair and equitable settlements with all of us concerned. And for that, that's just a word of support from the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other citizen comments? Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion or at the request of any citizen or council member. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Move Rhodes, second Terhar. Submitted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under unfinished business, item 1146, the Washtenaw County grant for a photovoltaic system on the City Hall roof. It's a motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 14, 2011 memo from Public Works Director Fordyce and Finance Director Burgoyne to accept and decline the $61,000 loan from Washtenaw County Economic Development and Energy Revolving Loan Fund for installation of a 12-kilowatt photovoltaic system on the roof of City Hall. Do you have a motion?
Move to decline.
Second.
Ms. Gearbaugh, second Law. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1131, we have two motions. One, which is a motion to accept or not accept the offer to reimburse for electrical usage or to move to table this. We can, either motion we could take, so.
I'll move to accept.
Moved Gearba. Do we have a second? I think the motion dies for lack of support. Do we have a motion to table?
Move to table.
Second.
Second? Second, Law. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Under new business, item 1193, the Urban County Program. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 16, 2011 memo from Finance Director Burgoyne to approve and adopt or not adopt the resolution as submitted authorizing Mayor Driscoll to sign a cooperation agreement with Washtenaw County after review and approval of the city attorney to participate in the Washtenaw Urban County Program for federal assistance from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development during the period of July 1, 2012 to June 13, 2015.
Move to approve and adopt and authorize.
Second.
Gearba, second, Morrow. Discussion? Mr. Law?
Question concerning, and this may have been asked or discussed during the work session, but how much does the city stand to lose from the state or resources of that kind should we get into this?
We don't have any project that we can foresee would qualify. In order for us to have a project, we'd have to have a business starting up that would hire people, for example, Mangiamo's or Max. Then we'd have to apply from the state, and it's competitive. We might not be chosen. And if we're chosen, we would have to show that at least 51% of the new jobs were of low and moderate income people, which for service staff at some place like Mangiamo's is doable. On the other hand, the business itself, if there were a new business, the business itself can apply to the state for this. So we're not really losing anything. The city would not be the vehicle for applying. The business would be the vehicle for applying to the state. So businesses can continue to apply to the state. Any new business can.
Mr. Law, is that, are you?
I'm still a little confused by that exclamation because I thought the Mrs. Callan came up and said something about that certain funds cannot be applied for, and I didn't know how much.
By the city.
By the
city could not be the one to apply for a new business, but the new business can be the applicant to the state.
Yeah, I got that. Okay. But we as a city cannot directly apply.
On behalf of that project, correct. That if we join with the county, as the other local entities mostly have done, we have a guaranteed amount that we will get, and they would help us to put the projects together. So we get not only the money, but we also get their expertise, which makes it more possible for us to get the money.
Go on.
Sufficient. Mr. Rhodes?
I was just going to mention that I support the Urban County Program, but I shall abstain from voting to avoid the perception of any conflict of interest, since I own a remodeling company, which in theory could apply to do some of the home rehabilitation programs.
Mr. Morrow?
Thank you, Mayor. To follow up on Mr. Law's line of questioning, Mr. Burgoyne, isn't it also correct that the money through MEDC, and MISHDA that we would no longer be able to apply for, that pot of money over the last 5 to 10 years, we've never requested any as an entity?
Correct. The last time we requested that was 1998. And we did that for a new industrial park, Sauk Trail Business Park. We did get funds for that. We looked at that. We don't have a new industrial park to open up. We don't have new projects that on the horizon that would qualify. So we don't foresee losing anything.
Thank you. And then, in addition to that question, Mayor, I strongly support participating in the Urban County Program. I appreciate how cooperative Mary Jo has been from the county. And I think, as I mentioned at our work meeting that we had prior to our last council meeting on this issue, I have been enthusiastic about this issue and about participating since my election to council in November 2008. In fact, Mary Jo and I had played phone tag for over a year and a half, in which I was trying to learn more about the program. But I see a profound benefit because it allows us access to federal capital to improve infrastructure to help keep seniors in their homes and provide resources to our citizens with special needs. And I think ultimately it will have a positive economic impact as well. So with that, I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this motion to participate in the Urban County Initiative. Thank you.
Is there additional discussion? I didn't bring this up with Ms. Callen, but CDBG money is always one of the primary cuts, first place to go by the federal. We probably should have asked Mr. Krasny, although I think it would have put him on the spot, how much that $6 trillion would have been CDBG. So I'm in favor of this, but I will warn all of council that, that's always been an issue that seems to be one of the go-to places to look at cutting. And I've talked to Ms. Callen about it before. So while that's projected, based on the current flow, I think there's a good possibility, depending on what budget you see, that CDBG money has always been. And I know it was cut, I don't know, 20 to 30. What percent was it cut this year? 16%, okay. But I know they were looking at 60 at one point, so I think it's going to be in that $6 trillion, budget that they were talking about. It's going to be, so everybody needs to keep their radar up about that.
Sure.
Because as you mentioned, it does have a significant impact to people's lifestyles. So if there is no further discussion on this motion, all in favor to approve and adopt, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Item 1194, ordinance number 734, this is to reestablish the Planning Commission. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt and reading of ordinance number 734, an ordinance to repeal Chapter 66, Planning of the Saline City Code, to replace the provisions thereof with an ordinance to confirm the establishment of the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, Public Act 33 of 2008, MCL 125.3801. Secretary, is that how you say it? Of the City of Saline Planning Commission, provide for the composition of that Planning Commission, provide for the powers, duties, and limitations of that Planning Commission, and repeal any ordinance or parts of any ordinances or resolutions in conflict with this ordinance, to approve and adopt or not adopt ordinance number 734 as submitted. Do you have a motion?
Move to approve and adopt.
Second.
Move Rhodes, second Law. Mr. Rulo.
Yes, I had a brief discussion with Councilman Gearbaugh before the meeting, and it was about a couple of the sections that he had some concern with. And I think I can address those, or some of the concerns now. And what you have in the council packet is the redrafted form of the ordinance in its entirety, with and without exceptions, things that were striked out, things that were added. And I didn't have that in front of me when I was talking to Mr. Gearbaugh, but it appears that some of the changes made here are only those that are required by PA 33, and those deal with just the establishment of the Planning Commission. And some of the sections that Mr. Gearbaugh was looking at, and he can probably state those again, and I can answer that, are those sections that are in the current code that are not subject to change due to PA 33. And
I'm going to ask the question.
Okay.
You're sort of, we're in the dark except for you and Mr. Gearbaugh, so
Okay.
That's why I was
just jump the
so
gun.
unsure how this is playing out.
Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions about different articles. Some of them, 66.29, which had members holding other city positions. It said the appointed members of the Planning Commission shall hold no other municipal office except that one such support. Appointed members may be a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I know that what about commission members? If you're on another commission and you're on the Planning Commission, that seems kind of odd when you read that in there. So it says members holding other city positions. It doesn't clarify what does that mean by city positions. So if you're a member on, say, the Celtic Festival and also on the Planning Commission, Is there a conflict there? The other one was appointment of employees, 66-36. It authorizes the Planning Commission that they may appoint employees that it deems necessary for its work. It says whose appointment, promotion, demotion, and removal shall be subject to the same provisions as govern the corresponding any civil employees of the city. That seems a little more question to me. 66-42, authority to accept, use gifts. The Planning Commission shall have the right to accept and use gifts for the exercise of its functions, which I think I understand where this is coming from, but usually we would have some kind of upon review and consideration by City Council. Section 66-66, final authority to approve a master plan or amendments thereto shall rest with the Planning Commission unless the City Council passes a resolution asserting their right to approve. I don't know if we have to do a new resolution to address that, or if we're okay. Yeah, I mean, we've already approved the master plan, but for any future changes. And then 66-98, the Planning Commission shall from time to time recommend appropriate public official programs for public structures and improvements, which is fine. I'm not sure how that currently plays out. What I would have liked to have seen was how this changed compared to what we currently have and what we added, so I didn't know what was going on. But some of those, like the gifts one, just seems a little odd that there isn't more language to it, clarifying that the governing body, because normally you have somebody else that accepts the gift on behalf of the city and clarifies what the use and purpose of it is. So I know we need to adopt this by supposedly the 1st, but I have some questions on here that I think need to be clarified, or for my purpose, just to understand, do we have any kind of legal issues handing out here?
Okay, I can deal with these one at a time, if you like. Section 6629 is an existing segment of the code. It's been there long before I even hired in 24 years ago. And that's a section that if you want subsequent review, we could review it with the Planning Commission. And we could also look into, in some of these cases, look into the bylaws also. But I'd have to meet with the Planning Commission Secretary and look into that to address that one. That's not a change, or that one's not changed by Public Act 33. The next one, Section 6636, the appointment of employees, that section also is a prior existing section of the code that basically we've not had to utilize or exercise in any way because of the current structure of the city having staff work as designated staff liaison and staff secretary. No need for the Planning Commission to have employees other than a contract the consultant as they normally do. So we've never exercised that or had to go to that section for any reason. It's just sort of archaic. But if you want that reviewed with them, we could do that also. Next one, Section 66-42, authority to accept and use gifts is also an existing clause in the zoning code. And I don't recall the Planning Commission ever being presented with any type of donation for any type of project. You know, that just doesn't happen at the Planning Commission level. And then I think there's one more, 66, or no, there's two more, 66-66. That segment we just sort of did an exercise on with the City Council. Prior to the City Council adopting the master plan, the City Council did pass a resolution that they were the authority. So in 5 to 10 years, if there was another master plan rewrite, then we would go through the same scenario and ask the City Council, do you want the Planning Commission to adopt the master plan, or do you want to adopt the master plan? They will decide at that time and then move forward on the adoption.
So that's done before we would proceed with going to review the master plan? I'm just saying, I'm not sure when this resolution takes effect, because it sounds like we approved it afterwards, but just setting up the authority and such. But as long as we keep doing what we did in the past, that'll be fine.
Correct. And then the last one is 66-99, and that section remains unchanged also. In here, we've always determined that this meant or applied to new projects, and basically the Planning Commission has done this in the past in all the new subdivisions and the extensions thereof, because where vacant land was turned into like a new subdivision, well, then the Planning Commission reviews to make sure all the standards, planning, construction, and everything apply to that. Although those projects more likely do end up before the City Council because it involves some infrastructure, either both before and after. Those items usually come to the Planning Commission because of the infrastructure improvements and receiving those and them being transferred to the city.
Okay. Yeah, my thing was just trying to figure out where the changes had occurred. And then some of these, when we do bring this up, this is probably about the time that we start reviewing this and start wondering. I just had a concern about the gift one and how that played out, just to make sure how we're acknowledging that tonight. But if we haven't had, I would just like to see maybe in the future that we can modify
We
that.
can delete it. If it's an issue, then just take it out.
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean,
I don't want-
think it's that big a deal either way. So, Mr. Rule, do you have, just, we never had taken gifts, why don't we just delete that section?
If you'd like to,
I mean, if that would
and make an amendment to
Mr.
that
Gearbox
effect.
feel more comfortable, I don't think we've
Well,
had.
it's not that, I just want to make sure that we have acknowledgement in the way we do it consistently with internal controls and such, so.
That's in the charter of the state law.
The planning commissions are allowed to do that?
Yeah, and so is the city allowed to receive gifts.
Well, right, but we're talking about the planning commission in this particular instance.
That they can accept it and then use it without any review by council. That's where I'm more of a concern.
I think it's a good suggestion. I'd take it out.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder.
To amend, for an amendment, Mayor?
I'll move the amendment.
I'll second.
We can just delete it and then delete it in the ordinance, and Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Law are accepting of that, then we don't need to do an amendment.
It's easier.
Correct.
Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder? Further discussion on this motion? So they'll only, with the, this will be as written and as read with the deletion of section 6642. Okay, so we have a motion, we have discussion. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1195, 2011 Street and Water Main Projects Construction Contract. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 15, 2011 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel to authorize or not authorize the award of the construction contract to DePonio Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $1,264,768.42 for the 2011 street and water main projects as outlined in the memo, to authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the contract documents with DePonio Contracting Incorporated for this project after review and approval of the city attorney. Do you have a motion?
Move to authorize and authorize.
Second.
Move Rhodes, second oral. Mr. Rubel?
Thank you. As you can see, we have a low bidder who's actually just 2% underneath the engineer's estimate, which is really a good place to be. For extra cushion, we have, of course, items in the contract that are more or less standby or have extra quantities than we'd likely use, so that gives us some more assurance that we'd be actually expending money less than the contract, and that's been the case on several past projects. So that's what we will aim for on this project this summer. As you can see by the attached map, we have the location of the 5 project areas, one being water main and street work on Tower Drive from Ann Arbor to Wallace, and then water main and street replacement on Nichols from Lambkins to Wallace, and then, of course, the replacement of pavement only and some structure work on Wallace Drive itself. There's a little half-a-block project called Woodbridge, a relatively unknown segment of street for most people, but that one used to be the parade route going to the schools. Many years ago, that little half-a-block stretch to the fence is known as Woodbridge and was a parade route for the homecoming parade. And then in the miscellaneous work, we have our agreement with Huntington Woods to replace the ramps and curbs, pavement marking and signs per our transfer agreement with them. So that'll be done with this contract. And then we have some miscellaneous ADA sidewalk ramps. For this contract, we did require that the contractor and the chief trades in the contractor be state certified or pre-qualified so that they had a good experience and were acceptable to do state work. We use state standards in much of the construction part of the document in the provisions. The plans were completed by Process Results, which is an engineering company in town. They gave us an exceptional proposal costs, and so the engineering costs were very low out of pocket. Supplement, of course, city staff dedicated a lot of time to developing the plans and the proposal documents. We look forward to working with Deponio for the first time here in Saline. We checked out their website. I talked to the president and the project manager for this project, and everything seems to look good for us in developing the project and delivering the project both on time and within the constraints of the project budget. If there are any other questions, any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Mr. Law?
Mentioned the contractor, they've never done work here in Saline. You did talk to the people that obviously run the company, and you're satisfied with their response. Have we checked out what they did in other communities, and have other communities been satisfied with their work?
I did ask I did ask our testing firm. We have a testing firm out of Plymouth also, HAEI, and they didn't have a problem with them either, although they had not done anything directly with them. They hadn't heard that they had anybody else had problems with them. They're predominantly working in Oakland County, and they do MDOT work regularly. I checked the website, and they had 4 or 5 projects there that were very similar to ours, street and water main projects in local neighborhoods and on some major streets.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rhodes?
2 things. One, with respect to Councilmember Law's question, I was able to verify this afternoon that this firm does have a very good reputation in other communities, and that they have been very responsive and were able to complete what they said they would on schedule, on budget. So I would definitely support them. But the primary thing I wanted to comment on was this Wood Bridge, which is just a bit of a street. I'd like to consider having some modifications to the gate at the end of that street so that bicyclists are going to be more easily able to access Tebow Drive, which runs on the other side of it. If I remember correctly now, you have to come up the sidewalks and then make a couple of 90-degree turns, and if you're on a bicycle with a child bike behind you or on a tandem bike, you really can't get through there without having to back and forth and get off your bicycle. So while we're doing things there and we're trying to work towards having more complete streets, I think it'd be a relatively inexpensive thing to do to modify that gate. Thank you.
Right. The gates and fence belong to the school district?
Well, and I've heard that before, and the school district says they belong to the city. So somebody needs to take ownership of that gate.
Yeah.
And modify
If you notice, it runs the entire length of the school property in all those backyards. So.
The gate does.
No, the fence, and then the gates farther back. But I think that was installed because so people would not go directly into the path of vehicles traveling down Tebow Drive. That was the intent of why they installed it. And they must have had a reason for that. But we can check with Mr. Bacon, who is the grounds director at the schools. We did talk to him in the past about the one at the end of Chandler Drive going into the middle school lot, and we were able to get that restored or partially replaced at one point in time and opened up. So maybe and get it to be more accessible because they had like a drop off. And so they were receptive to that. Even when we did the library site plan, coordinated that with the school and the library when they did improvements on that at our request. So we can talk to Mr. Bacon and try to work something out there.
Okay, I appreciate you working with the schools to resolve that.
I actually had a more radical proposal,
No gate.
which would be, it's not currently utilized, and there's no intention to utilize it in the not-too-distant future, so why are we repaving it? Why don't we make it a little pocket park or something for the neighborhood, not spend the money to repave it?
There's one driveway.
There is
for-
one
For the
driveway.
corner lot. That's right. Plus, we have a storm sewer system there. And one of the reasons that we're working on it is because at the bottom, we have to install 2 catch basins, because right now our stormwater runs off of our street into the school property. You know, so.
So that's
and,
one reason we're doing work on that location.
Right, right. I mean,
Maybe if there's a way to
If
make
we-
it just seems, we're making this whole 2-lane road for nobody to use, and I don't, is parking allowed there? It's just saying,
You can
clerk, I
park on
should have driven
Woodbridge.
by there on the way here to double look at it. But it just seemed to me to be, maybe try to think of a more creative reuse for that space in the neighborhood. I don't know if that would be of interest, but if it would save some money and it's not being used anyhow, maybe there's a way to make the non-motorized trail in the center, or do something more creative than just replicating what we currently have that's not fully utilized. So, just food for thought.
Those are good thoughts. I wish I'd carried my thought forward enough to arrive at that.
Have a little community garden there. Anyhow, further discussion on this motion. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to authorize and authorize. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1196, this will be exception of Complete Streets Ordinance, Section 74-273, Tower Drive. Not yet, Carl. Ready to go home? So motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 7, 2011 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel to approve or not approve the exception of Complete Streets facilities on the Tower Drive project at its intersection at North Ann Arbor Street as outlined in the June 7, 2011 memo.
Move to approve.
Kirby, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Rubel.
The memo was submitted as a matter of process because the recently adopted Complete Street Ordinance, I believe November last year. And because the Tower Drive project intersects North Ann Arbor Street, and North Ann Arbor Street supposedly has a future facility, even though it's just a minor exception, we decided we had to meet the letter of the rule here on the Complete Streets Ordinance. And the ordinance states that if we have one or more reasons why it's not practical, feasible, or economical to install part of a facility and not all of it, then we can grant ourselves an exception. And also in the considerations here is that we do have a project that we have programmed and will obtain federal funds for this project in 2014. And at that time, we'll probably be able to actually make a design for something that might work on North Ann Arbor Street for non-motorized. So the appropriate time to design it and build it would be with a whole project.
Mr. Rhodes.
I'm still slightly confused, and maybe it's the hour here this evening, but in the detail that's on the backside of that map that you've marked up, is the shaded work what you are asking an exception to not do?
Well, the shaded work basically is to show the area where our contract work is occurring this year. We are going in there and correcting the ramps to meet ADA, because
Yeah, they're too steep.
basically by law you have to do that.
They're too steep right now, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And they're also not wide enough in some cases, and don't have the domed, the templates, the detectable warning pad. So we have to update the ADA regardless of what we do.
So you are doing those things that are shaded in the detail.
Right.
So what is it that you're not?
Well, we're not making it to a 10-foot wide, non-motorized.
Okay.
With the signs and the pavement markings and the,
right,
because
gotcha.
it only would be a very short segment. And we'll look out of proportion with the intersecting 4-foot wide sidewalks.
Thank you.
Thank
Further
you.
discussion? That's a good question, though.
That's the reason why I supported it. I think it's better to plan ahead and we can see what we really want to do, and depending on which side of the street we end up putting a trail or whatever, that will be more important at that time. Cool.
Further discussion? Okay, we have a motion to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. 1197, Saline Recreation Center. Weight room equipment agreement. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 15, 2011 memo from Parks and Recreation Director Scruggs to approve or not approve the contractual agreement between the City of Saline and All Pro Exercise for a 3-year planned replacement program for cardio fitness equipment, 10 Matrix T5X commercial treadmills, 5 Octane Pro 3700 elliptical with side steps, and 2 Matrix S3X steppers at a cost of $67,915. To authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the contract and lease documents for this fitness equipment after review and approval of the city attorney. Do we have a motion?
I'd move to approve and authorize.
Second.
Move Rhodes, second to Har. Ms. Scruggs.
Mayor and council, we put out the bids and we received several bids back from authorized companies. And we had the opportunity to, some brought their equipment in for us to inspect and test and climb on and really check it out. And I had my building maintenance person inspect and talk with the representatives and talk with the maintenance department of each of those companies. And we came up with the recommendation for going with All Pro Exercise. All Pro is a company that's been around for a long time. Prior to the past 3-year period, we had purchased quite a bit of equipment from them when we were not doing the lease program. So we're very familiar with their product. We're very familiar with their repair service, and it's a very reputable company. The pieces of equipment that they're specifying meets or exceeds all of the equipment that was bid. And we're very excited about bringing in this equipment in order to stay up with the trends and stay up with the equipment that gets used constantly. We have over 100,000 miles on each one of our treadmills right now. And not quite on the ellipticals, but they're all very, very high mileage right now. And we're ready to turn in the equipment that we currently have and then replace those pieces of equipment with new treadmills, steppers, and ellipticals.
Discussion. Mr. Morrow.
I've got an easy one for you, Mrs. Scruggs, or Ms. Scruggs, excuse me, and I apologize for not giving you a buzz or shooting you an email, but this 67.9 figure, we're budgeted for that, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Law.
The lowest bid, Carla, was Pro Maxima that didn't meet specifications. What were those specifications?
We had to go to Canton to actually look at the equipment. This company is based out of Texas. They did not have any equipment locally that they could bring to us to demo, to really physically look at. So we traveled to Canton to take a look at it at a physical therapy place. The equipment just was more or less home quality equipment, and the motor size, the deck size, it didn't have emergency shutoffs. It just, there was no way we could have that in our center.
Thank you.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Rhodes.
Is this the same firm that we're leasing equipment from for the other half of that cardio area?
No. The current lease is with Direct Fitness Solutions, and they've been a great company to work with also, but they had a higher bid. I have no objections to Direct Fitness Solutions. They've been awesome to work with, but realistically, we can get the same quality equipment from this other company at a lower price.
So my question is, response time, repair response time is most priority for customer satisfaction. I see that it says repair response time is 24 to 48 hours. Do you have an out if they're not responsive as far as fixing the equipment?
Right.
I mean, I couldn't really see that.
All Pro, they offer a quarterly preventative maintenance. They'll actually come to our facility each quarter, and they'll maintain all of the equipment, repair some, and troubleshoot some things. They will also train my maintenance person to, like, if someone says something's wrong, he can go out there and we'll keep some parts, some of the most common parts that break, and he can repair those very quickly and turn it around. But really, I'm not concerned with their response time. Actually, even with Direct Fitness Solutions, they've been out within the day to take care of these things. And same with All Pro. When we used to have their equipment, they could come out within that day,
So
basically.
in your past experience with them, there wasn't a time, I guess that's just a question, is if the caliber of the business doesn't stay that same level, and in a year, they're not responsive, and we're having...
They're very responsive. I did call around to, I have colleagues that, from Macomb Township, from Livonia, Wayne, different places, and those are much bigger facilities, so they actually split their bids. So some people have Direct Fitness Solutions and All Pro at the same time, and some have fitness things. All of them are very, very good companies, and they will respond very quickly.
Okay. Mr. Law?
Just on that, Mayor, you mentioned about the response time. There's on their letterhead says the response time is 48 hours, and then on the scope work and general requirement they gave you, it's 24 to 48 hours. So it's minor detail, but I just wondered which number is correct.
I think they're telling us within 48 hours, but they will be there within 24 hours. And like I said, they'll keep some of the main things that we know we're having problems with on site so that we can repair those very quickly, get them back up and running.
Any further discussion on this motion? Motion is to approve and authorize. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 1199, stipulation settlement with G. Thompson's Poirier, 130 South Industrial Drive. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 3rd, 2011 memo from City Assessor Skull to approve or not approve the stipulation for entry of consent judgment for settlement for the 2009, 2010, and 2011 for real property assessment appeals for G. Thomas Porter versus City of Saline, MTT docket number 360351 for a revised 2009 assessed value and taxable value $189,000, revised 2010 assessed value and taxable value of $180,000, and a revised 2011 assessed value and taxable value of $161,000, and to authorize or not authorize the city attorney and city assessor to sign this stipulation. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve and authorize.
Second.
Law, second. Rhodes. Skull, you want to come up and... Thank you for being here.
I realize actually that by looking at the memo, you might not understand where this property exists. This is for Pear Tree Dental, which utilizes a couple of the Gateway Center office condominiums there. And actually, after a review of the market data available, it was determined that a small reduction was due. And as identified in the memo, the reduction and the difference due in city tax dollars is very minimal.
Okay. Any questions from Ms. Skull? Thank you. If there's no questions, any further discussion on this motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 11100, staff appointments and contracts for fiscal year 2011 to 2012. We have a motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 9, 2011 memo from City Manager Campbell and the June 16, 2011 letter from Attorney Grossman regarding retainer for legal services for fiscal year 2011-2012. We have a motion?
So move.
Rhodes, do we have a second? Second. Second, Terhar. Discussion? All in favor to acknowledge receipt, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have a motion to approve or not approve the classification and compensation plan grid effective July 1, 2011, indicating a pay freeze for fiscal year 2011 to 2012. Do we have a motion?
Moved to approve.
Move Gearbat to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Morrow. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next motion is a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt the resolution as submitted appointing staff and setting their compensation for the period of July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2012, which would be a wage freeze for fiscal year 2011 to 2012.
Move to approve and adopt.
Second.
Second, Law. Approve and adopt. Discussion? Mr. Gearbox?
This year I will be approving this, but I do have concerns with the potential that we're looking at, if we're looking at doing changes with our dispatch. I think we need to be looking at other potential positions and such as we're looking at redundancies and potential problems where we may have it. If we're looking at a total department, I think we should look at the total department and look at all other aspects. So, I mean, we're putting this forward for a year, so I hopefully if anything does happen with the other services, we need to look at administrative oversight and everything and adjust accordingly.
So that would be part of the budget discussion next year, if you want to
Yes.
put it in the budget discussion?
And part of the, if we move forward on our dispatch thing, too.
Any further discussion on this motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we have a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt the resolution as submitted appointing city officers for the period of July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2012, at the wages established in ordinance number 729, which is a wage freeze for fiscal year 2011 to 2012.
Move to approve and adopt.
Second.
Move Morrow, second Terhar, to approve and adopt. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we have a motion to approve or not approve the employment contracts with appointed staff and officers for the period of July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2012, to authorize or not authorize the mayor, clerk, and city manager to execute the employment contracts as submitted. We have a motion?
Move to approve and authorize.
Second.
Move Rhodes, second Morrow. Discussion.
Mayor, again, the same concern. Just want to make sure that we look at all potential cuts and effects that are impacting on our employees and staff, and look at any redundancies and such that we can do in order to save ourselves money, pending what happens with the state next year.
I'd also make comment that I'd just like to thank our staff for their hard work in recognizing that they have, we have been coming to the table repeatedly, not only for salary wage freeze, but also for compensation benefits, specifically with health, the health savings account and other areas. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all the work that you do. We have an excellent city because of our employees, and I hope we can get everybody at the table to be all the same. That's one of our goals, is to have parity across the board, union and non-union. So I hope that we can get to that point, hopefully in the next year, regarding the contributions that all the employees make. But we really have excellent caliber employees, and they do go above and beyond. And I just want to say that we really appreciate and we recognize it. So thank you. I don't know if that's the right place to put it. Sure. We have to go before the end of this motion on payroll. And the reason that this goes so quickly is because we had this discussion when we did the budget process in March and April and set the budget in May. So this was all discussed a long time ago, and it's just a formality because it's the end of our fiscal year, more or less. It's a formality, but anyhow, so is there any further discussion on this motion to approve and authorize? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll go on to discussion items, commission committee reports from council members. Any commissioner committee reports since our last council meeting? Mr. Rhodes.
Environmental Commission met a while ago, and we're beginning to dialogue about how the Environmental Commission could best serve the community. And so we are reviewing all of the various documents that pertain to how the Environmental Commission functions. And I think I've requested input from the rest of the City Council and the Environmental Commission. And then on July the 2nd, the Environmental Commission will be staffing the tent at the Farmers Market that Saturday morning. Mary Hess has volunteered to assist me with staffing during that 4-hour period, and we will be distributing materials that we have are in the process of obtaining from the county at no cost to the city about environmental matters that we can distribute to folks who come by. The commission is also working to upgrade our page on the city website so that it can be more informative to the citizenry. And last but not least, we have a few rain barrels left over from the rain barrel class that was conducted a month or so ago, and those are available for sale for $45 each. And we will have information about those at the July 2nd market also.
Great. Mr. Law.
The Planning Commission dealt with a couple of issues that were coming up, and one was the Pavel Pop property. That's the vacant building that's on Woodland near the, not far from the Flat Out area. And we agreed to approve the final site plan for another year in efforts to hopefully have him sell that facility. The other issue was agreeing with ACH to replace trees that were certainly not in the best shape, and but certainly the issue of the sidewalk was still a sticking point and still remains to be so. And that was raised a little bit as part of the discussion, but ultimately that motion prevailed.
Is there any other committee or commission reports? I guess I'll just report that the Celtic Festival planners met last Thursday and are continuing on with lots of new ideas and lots of energy and great entertainment. And they've added a 5K run for any of you that want to get a little exercise before you go down and watch the heavy, Highland heavy athletic guys. Feel like you're contributing to health and welfare of the community, but they're doing a really great job of coming up with some innovative and creative things that will bring a lot of people to the community. I think that I was at some COG stuff last week, so that's all my committees that I went to. Anybody else? Okay, do we have any reports or other announcements?
Mayor, actually, I have a question that actually tags on to Mr. Law's comment about the Woodland Drive. Yesterday, when I went out to the rec center's dedication, rededication, I noticed that two of the old R&B buildings, the grass and the trees and the stuff around it are starting to look pretty, it looks pretty scruffy. How are we looking at that from the Planning Commission standpoint of some of the factories and things that we aren't selling? Because it looks kind of bad, and that's why I just wanted to address, as you were mentioning that one.
Issues. We can just, if you
Yeah.
send an email to Mr. Campbell,
Yep.
that would be great. Reports and other announcements? Well, you touched on the 20-year anniversary of the dedication of the rec complex, and also Carla Scrugg's 20-year anniversary coincidentally with the success of the facility. So congratulations to both of you. I understand it was a great, very well-attended 3-day celebration, and we had more than one live mermaid. I heard we had 2. It's pretty amazing. So anyhow, kudos to your staff for planning a great weekend and celebration. I also, we have our concert series going on now, Thursday nights, so for anybody that hasn't made it to a concert, get on bsaline.com. You can check out the concert, and they're downtown every Thursday night. And I had one other thing. Oh, I wanted to let you know that I went to this Metropolitan Planning Organization National Conference, and they had a lot of information on solar energy communities, Mr. Rhodes, that there's a lot of opportunity out there, I think, for working with residents, and I got some information that I'm going to get to you, but I think that might be something that you might want to look into a little bit more in the Environmental Commission, too.
We will. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Chief Bunton, you need an update on police dispatch services?
I'd be happy to. As I've discussed previously, we've had informal meetings with Pittsfield Township and other agencies around our area about how we could combine certain services and save money, one of which we've combined with Pittsfield Township on training. We do a lot of our training together. It saves time and money for both agencies. We began some time ago talking about the possibility of combining our dispatch operations. We felt that there's really no immediate need this year to do that, but we needed a lot of planning time to make sure that this would happen very seamlessly. The projections are that we're going to need to do stuff like this in the future, and it fits in with the governor's ideas of working with other agencies and saving money. We envision a process that's going to take about a year for us to complete so that we have all of the procedures, the policies, the training worked out. Pittsfield Township is very interested in partnering with us. They are very interested in training their dispatchers in all of the ins and outs of the city of Saline, the businesses, the streets, the residents, so that it can be very seamless for our customers. The concept at this point, it's just a concept, involves having Pittsfield Township handle all of our dispatching operations, where there would always be 2 dispatchers on duty at all time. We only have 1, and it does get to be problematic during storms and critical events. We currently spend close to $250,000 annually to maintain our dispatch operation. The savings after the first year would be probably around $100,000. The first year, we're going to have to spend some money to make this happen. There has to be some sort of a gate put up over our dispatch counter so that there's no access over the counter. Have to put a telephone in that goes directly to the dispatch center. But there is a tremendous savings down the line in the future. Dispatch is a very expensive operation because of technology. Technology is great, but it's extremely expensive, and there's ongoing charges. Instead of both agencies doing this, we would collaborate on the sharing of technology. It would be less expensive for both agencies. Washtenaw County, the county itself, currently has 8 functioning primary answering points, public safety answering points. That's a lot. We probably have, I don't want to say we have more than any other county, but we're right up there. That's a lot of equipment, a lot of cost to maintain. The question's been asked, why aren't we looking at Washtenaw County Sheriff's Metro Dispatch instead of Pittsfield Township? I have asked the sheriff for numbers so that we can do due diligence. But that dispatch center handles about 80,000 911 calls annually and another 400,000 regular telephone calls. That's a lot of calls. We handle 800 911 calls annually and about 15,000 regular telephone calls. We get into a larger dispatch with that many calls, you're going to be queued an awful lot, and dispatches aren't going to happen very fast. I don't think we could expect the same type service delivery that we have right now. And the delivery of service to our customers is of paramount importance to me. Whether we go with Pittsfield, whether we go anyplace else, or whether we stay here, it's extremely important. I believe that Pittsfield Township Police demand the same customer service of their employees that we do, and they actually have the time with lower call load to give that value-added service that we really believe in Saline. Our cost for doing this would be our PSAP money, our primary answering point money that we get for the telephone lines in the city, which is about $55,000 annually, along with the difference between that and the cost of one dispatcher, which is $63,488. And our total for that would be about $63,000 total with the PSAP money and paying for that dispatcher. So it would be cost effective for us. We're continuing to work on the concept. We have to do a lot of policy and procedural issues, structural issues, and I'll work very closely with Mr. Campbell so that he's constantly informed of where we are on this, so that City Council can also be informed.
Are there questions for Chief Bunn? Mr. Mr. Morrow?
Chief, I just want to follow up on a comment you made because I've been getting some feedback from some residents who are confused about this. But just to reemphasize, because I think it's that fundamental and that important, this is just in the planning stages and has not received an official blessing from either Pittsfield Township or the City of Saline.
It is. This is conceptual at this point. We're just going through the work of developing it to bring it back to the elected officials for decisions on both ends. The one thing I want to emphasize, that the speaker earlier seemed to speak like we were going to do away with dispatch completely. We're not. When somebody calls 911 or calls the Saline Police Department 7-digit line, it'll be answered Saline Police Department, regardless of where it's being dispatched from. That's very important, and the dispatcher will be trained and know and understand the City of Saline.
Thank you.
No one's answered.
Any further questions? Okay, so what is the time frame for working out the details so we can have a work session? I know there's a lot of public concern, and I would think we really need to make sure, even maybe a report with every council meeting or something about the status, and maybe at some point have a work session.
Probably won't be happening fast enough to come to every council meeting, but certainly once a month would probably be a good idea.
And at some point, we probably need to have a work session when you're have some of the questions. I have sat in on a meeting or two, and my position has been and will continue to be that the level of service would not be impacted. That there, again, as you said, if somebody was calling in, that we would be just as responsive with the familiarity with the community. I mean, that's a big concern, is that the level of service is not impacted, and the opportunity to place our dispatch within Pittsfield Township, how to work those things out. As you mentioned, this is partly due to the fact that Lansing wants us to collaborate more in order for us to get dollars that they promised us when they created Proposal A. So they've taken away those dollars, and now they're saying, well, we'll give them back to you if you do things differently. So this is one of the things that we're being required to look at in order to access dollars that, in my mind, we should be getting anyhow. So it's very frustrating, but I appreciate Mr. Morrow pointing out the fact that this is still a discussion, and we're still trying to figure out what the pros and cons are and how the actual process would be implemented. I know, I was involved with building. We have a dispatch, we have holdings. I mean, we have a lot of facilities that would be utilized differently. So there's really a lot of outstanding issues that continue to be looked at. And then I think there's a big question about the technology and how to integrate. That's probably one of the bigger pieces too. So, but anyhow.
And to speak to that, in a perfect world, I wouldn't want to be doing this, to be honest with you. It's an awful lot of work. I don't like losing our dispatch operation, but if we can do it and make it virtually seamless to our customers, there's a lot of money to be saved by doing that.
And we're talking, my understanding is preliminarily we were talking about having your office, the dispatch location open during the day and just not at night, correct?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
And our budget, the police department budget, is like 28 to 30% of the general fund budget. We've got to look at ways of conserving money.
Okay. Mr. Law.
Well, I don't want to get into a whole discussion about it because it is, just as the chief said, is a preliminary issue and discussion. But since you did raise the point, Mayor, I'll just say that I have very strong reservations about it at all, just given the fact that and again, I'm not going to say a lot, but just that I believe the police department is a fabric of the community that should always be maintained and should always be purely for that community. And while I appreciate the chief's comments earlier to me about having things being economically driven, sometimes you have to say the heck with it and do what I think would be the right thing, and that is to keep the dispatch system the way it is. It is a purely Saline thing and should be maintained as such. That's my view at this point. Unless I'm swayed, otherwise I don't think I will be. But again, I don't want to get into a discussion about it, but since it's been touched on, I have some serious concerns about it.
Further discussion? Okay. I forgot in the reports and announcement that we're having a downtown form-based code workshop on June 29th regarding downtown, doing a downtown overlay. This has come up over time for two reasons. One, because we've been looking at more flexibility with developments that occur downtown, and also as part of the discussion when we updated our master plan, we felt that there need to be more focus on the downtown area, just being crucial to our sense of community. So for anybody that would be interested, it's June 29th, 7 to 9 p.m. at Liberty School Cafeteria, and hopefully it's on our website. If not, can we make sure it's on our website? Okay. And then our next item is outdoor sidewalk cafes. It came up at the last meeting that there was some concern about whether or not the city was ADA compliant with the restriction of the width of the sidewalk with those cafe tables. And I asked Mr. Grossman to look into that, and if you could give us a report.
Yes. First of all, the question of current ADA compliance, it is our belief that we are compliant with ADA standards. The ADA standards presented to us in a letter from Mr. Proster, anyway, are not requirements, but simply guides based on the best knowledge we have at this time. So the only thing really that it seems to me we have to look at is two things. First of all, it is a provision of our zoning ordinance, section 6.09, sidewalk cafe service. Item 3 says if a sidewalk cafe is located on a public sidewalk, a minimum of 5 feet of unobstructed pedestrian access along the sidewalk shall be maintained. In some of the agreements, we have a number of sidewalk cafe agreements, that has been referred to as 3 feet. So there's a question, first of all, where are we requiring 3 feet of unobstructed pedestrian pathway, and where are we requiring 5 feet? Clearly, our ordinance provides for 5 feet, and on let's see, Mr. Rubel and the building inspector did go out and look at the distance that was being kept for pedestrian traffic at the various places, and determined that there was 5 feet available. If there's any question about that, that's something that can be reviewed, of course. But we're talking. What we're doing here is balancing the benefit that the society the city is receiving from making its streets be part of a pleasant experience, and I'm sure you all know that since we've had these sidewalk cafes, if you've driven past there, they're very crowded and very popular, and we don't want to do anything to make them go away. On the other hand, the safety of our citizens is always of paramount importance, and we don't want to do anything that will jeopardize that. So I don't know, I've not personally measured and can't speak to whether there's 5 feet or 3 feet on each sidewalk cafe of unobstructed pedestrian pathway, but that's something that can be certainly looked into.
So as part of, I did some research on, since 2004, we've been allowing a 3-foot walkway on South Ann Arbor Street, and I had talked with Mr. Grossman about this, and because we have varying widths, and as he said, you know, it's difficult to have outdoor seating in some of the sidewalks because they are pretty narrow. And Mr. Campbell had already pre-planned family vacation. What I'd like to ask council to do is that we work with staff to try to come up with a policy. Right now, it's been 3 feet for the last, so like I said, since 2004, and so whether or not that works. I mean, the other thing was the grates, you know, whether or not we could get smaller grates so it would allow a little bit more room, or what kind of flexibility we have there, because so anyhow, what I would suggest is we ask Mr. Campbell to prepare a report and bring it back to the next council meeting since he's not here. It is a policy that, you know, a long-standing policy that we've had, and we aren't currently in violation of ADA. So, Mr. Law.
But there is a conflict, it appears, that from our ordinance stating 5 feet, and yet in
Right,
some
but
places
we-
3, we need to get that
Well, we
somehow.
specifically did an exclusion in 2004 as part of the agreement for tables to go on South Ann Arbor Street in the effort to have outdoor seating on that location. So if we need to adapt that, what I would suggest is, because we do have several locations with outdoor seating, is figure out what we have, you know, what is feasible, ask staff to look into that, and bring back a report at the next meeting. Because we have specifically allowed that since 2004 as part of a license agreement for using the sidewalks. So, anyhow, Mr. Morrow, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, Mayor, with no disrespect intended to any of my colleagues or anybody for that matter, I think this issue is a bit of a red herring, and I applaud your recommendation, I guess, to reserve, you know, discussion and debate until Mr. Campbell comes back, but I'm of the opinion that this issue was settled. You know, this was reviewed by the Building and Engineering Department, City Clerk, and Police Department prior to its approval in April. I think this issue's been settled, and if people have complaints or want to discuss this issue, it's reviewed annually, and we can do it in April 2012.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure, council. Mr. Gearba.
I believe there's a balance between us, and I do support sidewalk cafes and such uptown. I just want to make sure that what we provide is a reasonable accommodation for those who are using that sidewalk, especially now with Mangiamo's and the bakery and everything on there. There's a lot more traffic going through there, and I think that's probably on that side of the street. But in general, for the whole city, there are a lot more tables out in locations, and I know that we acquired property for handicap access, and now there's more setting tables in other areas that are potentially a problem. So if we have a clear and consistent way that we're approaching it, yes, we can do minimums, but is minimum enough if there are potential where people are using larger motorized scooters, or a blind individual has to maneuver a lot of obstacles and such? I think we need to keep a clear path. So whatever we can do to make that best and accommodate our business owners that can have seating outside, I think is the approach that we need to look at, especially if we got concerns where we may be in conflict with our own ordinance. So I recommend the referral to Todd.
Okay, can I hear from other council members? Mr. Law.
You've already heard from me, but I agree that we should have some form of report, at least showing where we can be more consistent with what our ordinance states.
Further discussion? I'll ask Mr. Campbell to bring something back at the next meeting. And just finally, there is opinion on the Open Meetings Act and email from Mr. Grossman. Just wanted to make sure that council was aware that we don't do group emails. So, and then under public comment, is there any other discussion items? Under public comment, under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's unique when it says a sidewalk with a minimum of 5 feet and unobstructed. The scales of justice is blindfolded because you use the rules for everyone, our friends, the people who we'd prefer not to talk to or allow to talk, and our enemies. That's why it's a rule. That's why it says shall. I think that you have jeopardized, which is not proactive, but it's going to be reactive, and we'll all feel bad if someone gets hurt. I also feel that it was interesting on those who were able to speak 2 weeks ago, and tonight, those that couldn't. I think at the beginning, be it if there's handicapped or whatever, that there should be time at the beginning rather than 10:15, 2 weeks ago. And Lisa Garrison, I will apologize that it appears because I got up first 2 weeks ago that I was out of line, but others weren't. And I do agree, not only with the gay pride, but bullying is definitely not of good character, even if you have a hammer. Thank you.
Mrs. Hess, I just wanted to clarify, I don't know if you remember, but when that motion was made in 2004, you were the one that moved the motion to allow the 3-foot width. So we are trying to address that issue in a reasonable form, and we have continued to bring that forward every year and have discussion, and I appreciate your concern now, but we're trying to balance having outdoor seating with...
And how many tables were there in 2004?
Up to
so
10.
There's
10.
a big increase.
Up to 10. Up to 10. But anyhow, I just wanted to clarify that. You know, it's obviously a work in progress. We are trying to have a vibrant downtown, and we have constrictions because we have an older downtown, and we like our buildings right up to the sidewalk because it adds a good atmosphere, but then it makes it difficult to have outdoor seating. So, is there further discussion, or are there further public comments?
Good evening. I'm Paul from the Brecken Grill. And discussing this cafe seating, I do appreciate the time that you're giving to it. And over the years, I'm really not aware of any violations that are happening on that sidewalk as far as, us violating the agreement that we have with the city. I'm more than willing to do whatever is required to make that a safe area, as long as I'm able to function and have a business that is vibrant as well. I know that it brings a lot of people, and during the summer music series and so forth, that they can sit out there. And especially when they close off the street, there's definitely room for people to move around during the music series and so forth. I've had my business in this community for 9 years, as you know, and in that agreement with the city, it's been since 2004, like you stated. The 10 tables that was mentioned just a few moments ago were on the South Ann Arbor Street. We entered into a new agreement on Michigan Ave just a couple of years ago, and I think that definitely has increased the visibility of the city and what it has to offer when people are driving by, or if they stop at the street light there at Saline, Ann Arbor, and they notice what's going on with those tables. It kind of, there's a little flag that sticks out for them. Again, if any changes need to be made, I always have been interested in working with the city. But however, when I am or my business is attacked or accused, in addition to being falsely accused in that matter, I do find it as a little bit slanderous to my personal and business reputation, as well as to the city that's mentioned in it. So I believe I have been compliant with the city, state, and federal ADA regulations, like you stated, and I do appreciate your time. Thanks.
Is there further public comment? Is there any other business to come before the Saline City Council? Just wanted to clarify our upcoming meetings. We are at the ATA meeting that we were tentatively going to have tonight. We're going to have a work session, I believe, at 7 p.m. because you said 6:30? I don't think we need an hour, do we? Okay, 6:30. I'd rather have it at 7, but...
On which date, Mayor?
That would be July 11th.
Okay.
And we don't have another meeting before the Celtic Festival, so everybody keep in mind that the Celtic Festival is July 9th. Actually, there's events Friday night and Thursday night also. And concert series. I'm trying to think if there's anything else between now and our next meeting. But, okay. Oh, right. Okay, and we're having a work session before the July 18th meeting, also regarding sort of a strategic plan for energy efficiency projects throughout the community. Mr. Law, I see you smiling.
What time is that, Mayor?
6:30. Mr. Fordyce will be putting something up, I think a presentation together.
Mayor, if I might, I still have to publish traffic control orders for the 5K run for the Celtic Festival. They got backlogged because of routing and everything. Can I have council's permission to go ahead and publish those for the 5K run instead of bringing them to council?
Fine. Wait, didn't we approve the route before?
I don't think we approved the route. We approved having the 5K run.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I think you're the safety official. I mean,
Thank you very much.
is that okay with council?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we have upcoming meetings. Any other items? We have a motion to adjourn at 9:38.
So moved.
Second.
Move Morrow, second Gearba. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.